In A Song of Ice and Fire, there are more than a few mysteries which George has allowed to remain unsolved. And no, this is not referring to Wynn's release date. Sorry to disappoint. Some, of course, have strongly implicit answers, like the true parentage of Jon Snow. Others have been left by the wayside, or otherwise fulfilled to the satisfaction of the characters, even if the answer is incorrect. Such as Joffrey being the one to send the cat's paw after Bran. And then there are those remaining few, which have no clear answers. Or worse, too many. Such is the curious case of Sir Mandon Moore, and why he tried to kill Tyrion.
In case you've forgotten, Moore is the Kingsguard who gives the imp a botched nose job during the Battle of the Blackwater, for which he is duly chastised by Podrick Payne. Look, Tobby, if you're going to be writing for us, you must use the appropriate terms. His name is Pod the fucking Rot. You like baseball, don't you? Well, this is strike one, boyo. In the aftermath, Tyrion is immediately convinced that Cersei had ordered Moore to do the deed. But the evidence for this is, well, it's all in Tyrion's head. Truth be told, there are several candidates who both had a reason to want the imp cut shorter than he already is, and possessed the opportunity to delegate this task to Sir Moore. Suspect 1. Cersei, Gaslight Queen Lannister. The first and most obvious candidate, of course, is Cersei, which in itself should be evidence of her innocence, because since when the fuck does George give us an easy and correct answer? But before eliminating her from the suspect list, we should do our due diligence and explore why she is a person of interest in the first place. While Cersei and Tyrion have never been the most loving of siblings, their relationship takes a final nose-diving turn for the worst right before the Battle of the Blackwater during a fateful family dinner. Cersei, paranoid and fearing Tyrion intended to knock off either or both Joffrey and Tommen, had kidnapped who she believed to be the imp's latest mistress. Despite this misidentification, Tyrion, wisely deducing that arguing with a paranoid narcissist is about as safe as reasoning with an incendiary bomb, whilst covered head to toe in petrol, decides to act the monster Cersei believes him to be, and threatens to beat and, you know what, Tommen should anything happen to the innocent girl. It's a bluff, of course. Tyrion loves his nieces and nephews. Well, 2/3 of them. But Cersei, understandably for once, takes it seriously, and so a stalemate settles. During the battle itself, Cersei fears for Joffrey's life, regardless of Tyrion's assurances that he will be as safely guarded as any incest goblin can be in an active war zone. It is not impossible to postulate that she projects the blame for this fear and unavoidable risk onto Tyrion as a scapegoat, and thus, in her signature narcissistic spite, gives orders to at least one of the Kingsguard that, should the battle seem to be going awry, make sure Tyrion does not survive it. All that being said, Cersei almost certainly is not the puppeteer tugging Sir Moore's strings. What's that? How do we know this? Why, it's elementary, my dear Thompson. For one, she is clearly deathly afraid of Tyrion. Any overt attempt on his life risked failure, and the consequences to her and her offspring would be more than fatal. She's stupid, but she's not this fucking stupid. Secondly, there is simply no evidence, circumstantial or otherwise, connecting the two. The impulse for investigating Cersei's involvement comes to Tyrion while he lies half-conscious in a sick ward, high on milk of the poppy, and in great pain. In a real investigation, you need more than gut feeling to make a case, my dear Thompson.
What the fuck's a
Thompson?
So, no, it's not Cersei. Let us return to the others who had both motive and opportunity. Suspect 2. Joffrey, The noblest boy who ever lived. That's strike fucking two, Tobby! Well, Tyrion later convinces himself in a storm of swords, while more than a little drunk on morning wine, that Joffrey was the one to send the cat's paw after Bran. Cersei passes the buck on to the dead boy when questioned by Jaime on this same issue. And it's not like Tyrion and Joffrey had the strongest of uncle-nephew bonds before the Battle of the Blackwater. But there's just one snag. Why Mandon Moore, and why now? It doesn't sit right with this suspect's characterization. Joffrey is a petty little shitheel. That sits right with his characterization though, Tobby, so I rescind one strike. But after calling for Sir Ilyn to bring him Ned's head, and a few pot shots at peasants with a crossbow, he doesn't show a lust for blood. And in those two cases, he's playing to the crowd and feeding his ego with public displays. Having Tyrion killed in such a discreet manner, that's not the MO of the noblest boy who ever lived, and we're straight back to 2 strikes. Tobby, if you get free, I will fire you. Out of a catapult. Okay, but maybe there is something we are missing. Have Joffrey and Sir Mandon ever been strongly associated with each other in the text? Well, sort of. During the King's Landing riot, Sir Mandon is referred to as being Sansa's sworn shield. Tyrion chastises him for losing the girl, though prioritizing the safety of Joffrey is the correct protocol here. In what fucking universe, Tobby? Other than that, they are scarcely ever in the same room. While Joffrey may wish Tyrion dead, and he does have access to Sir Mandon, there is not even circumstantial evidence connecting the two. Alright, so Joffrey and Cersei may not be totally cleared of suspicion, but there are a couple more persons of interest in this case. Tyrion has made plenty of enemies during his tenure as acting hand, and we have yet to check out Moore's background for clues. The Imp had Bronn and Varys on the case, but their findings seem meager. Another dead end then, right? Well, not quite, my dear Thompson. There are clues here, though we'd need to think a little outside of the box. George is a subtle writer, most of the time at least, and it is not beyond him to tip his hand by having the reader make associations. Sir Moore comes from the Vale, and was ostensibly one of Jon Arryn's favoured subordinates. He had no connections to otherwise lean upon, no mighty name or lineage, and never made a great impression even after his elevation. Does that remind you of anyone, my dear Thompson? Suspect number 3. Peter the Ladder Baelish. Littlefinger, of course, worked his way up to Master of Coin through his connection with Jon Arryn, first proving himself as a customs officer and given further and more important duties until reaching the apex of the financial sector. Meanwhile, he replaces incumbent officials with his own men. While the Moores appear to be a noble house, they are certainly of lesser standing, given Sir Mandon's apparent anonymity before Jon brought him to court. The only other Moores we know of were one of Maegor's Kingsguard and a companion to a Targaryen princess, both only mentioned in Fire and Blood. Due to this, we can reasonably propose that Moore is part of Littlefinger's network due to their shared Valeman origins and relatively low birth. But how and why would Littlefinger want Tyrion dead, let alone have more in place for the deed? Curious, Thompson, curious. Well, among Tyrion's innumerable flaws, he reveals to Littlefinger that he knows the latter framed him for the attempted assassination of Bran Stark. He also dupes Littlefinger when smoking out who is reporting to Cersei among the small council, tempting him with Harrenhal and the effective Lord Paramountcy of both the Vale and the Riverlands just for delivering a message. Incidentally, this is one of the very few times anyone has provoked Baelish into dropping his mask of amiability, which in turn exposes Tyrion's high level of threat to his machinations. To say the least, my dear Thompson, there is already bad blood between the two. On top of that, Littlefinger's personal ambitions require Tyrion's removal, namely his connivance with the Queen of Thorns to kill Joffrey, incest goblin Tobby, and frame Tyrion, thus freeing Sansa for himself. We know little of his endgame, and he has a reputation for improvisation rather than deeply set schemes. Baelish had been planning this one out since at least early in A Clash of Kings, given the fact that Dontos' promises of freedom to Sansa are really from him. He also is the one to leak the Tyrell's plan to marry Sansa and Willis to Tywin, something even Varys apparently did not know about. Curious. And which Baelish most certainly knew through his partnership with Olenna. Let us quickly summarize our findings thus far, my dear Thompson. We know Moore and Baelish have had similar backgrounds. Moore is likely Littlefinger's representative on the Kingsguard, later reinforced by Osmond Kettleblack. Littlefinger has been plotting to remove both Joffrey and Tyrion for a while, and this goal has been tied to his desire for Sansa. This is already more than we have for either Cersei or Joffrey, but there is still the matter of direct proof. Littlefinger also has the reasonable alibi of negotiating with the Tyrells for an alliance. So if Sir Mandon was indeed acting on his orders, the chain of communication must have involved some powerful glass candles. Overall, while we have decent circumstantial evidence, and this might be enough for most readers, there is strong room for reasonable doubt here. We are running out of threads to pull here, my dear Thompson. It seems the case is going cold. There is one suspect whose role has so far been overlooked. Unlike the others, we can place him at the scene of the crime, we have motive, and we most certainly have opportunity. I refer, of course, to... Suspect 4, Sir Mandon Moore. Hey, that rhymed, Tobby! What if all these conspiracy theories are just a red herring? George clearly wants us to believe Moore was acting under orders from someone else.
Who gave you the order?
But George does so love subverting expectations. My expectation is that he will never release Winds of Winter.
Now subvert my expectation, old man!
Me thinks, well, Tobby thinks, the author doth protest too much, and oft times the simplest answer proves the most correct. That's right, my dear Thompson. Occam's razor, boy! Quite simply, Sir Mandon Moore is the first person Tyrion pisses off as acting hand, actually, before he even takes office. When initially arriving in King's Landing, the imp finds the door to the small council securely guarded by Sir Moore. After a precursory attempt to reason, because Tyrion is nice and polite, he less than subtly threatens the Kingsguard with Bronn and Timett, son of Timett, telling him Bronn killed Savardis Egan, former head of now, Lord Arryn's personal guard, and a man whom Moore may have known well. Only then does Moore relent and allow Tyrion access. The next time they interact is that scene just after the riots where Tyrion needs to be dragged off of Joffrey by Moore. What are you doing, Sir Moore?
Let him kill his nephew.
Then turns around and blames him for losing Sansa in the chaos. Clearly, Tyrion has given Sir Mandon reason to dislike him. Is it really too unreasonable to suppose that Moore held a grudge for these public humiliations, and when he saw an opportunity to strike back at Tyrion, he took it? In other words, no more, no less than simply a petty man with a petty grudge.
Got your nose.
Even George's minor characters are written in such a way that they are human to their very core, with all the good and the bad that entails. This too would fit well with Martin's themes and motifs. The attempt on Bran's life matters less for whoever actually issued the orders than for how it sets in motion the whole events of the series. Similarly, the aftermath of Moore's act turns Tyrion ever more bitter and paranoid, impressing the turn towards nihilistic cynicism and outright villainy that reaches its fruition with patricide.
The worst day of your life so far.
And finally, there is one little hint, my dear Thompson. A small act of foreshadowing set up all the way back in that first Tyrion chapter of A Clash of Kings. The passage is on screen, but the gist is Tyrion was always looking for a hint that could let him get a read on more. When that hint arrives, it saves Tyrion's life. Perhaps, like Tyrion's intuition, we will never know why Sir Mandon tried to kill him. And I guess like Bran's failed assassination, that's kind of the point. It's not the intent, but the attempt that matters, because it turns Tyrion into the monster everyone thought him to be. And that's Tobby's take. I have to say, besides the teething incidents, 2 strikes will not be tolerated again, I thoroughly enjoyed that, buddy.